The tale of Lord Refa and the dragon's hoard. And now, my children, comes the story of Lord Refa and the dragon's hoard. Lord Refa came from the country from the west, and was a greedy and powerful lord in his own land. And over the years he developed an obsession about the legendary hoards of treasure guarded by dragons, and as it so happens, here in our country dragons and men live side by side, and so, he fixated on our country. He raised an army, and came here determined to both slay the dragons and claim their hoards for his own. But he failed and paid the price. When he first arrived here he only had a few of his troops with him, and he quickly discovered that our country was not as he had imagined it. He thought that the dragons ruled harshly over the people who lived here and they would gladly help him slay the dragons. Instead he discovered that the people and dragons lived peacefully side by side in friendship. Villages, towns, and cities dotted the landscape, and in between were farms, fields, forests, and rivers. But to Lord Refa's surprise, he found that the cities, towns, and even the villages had dragons watching over them. Huge beasts guarded each one. Men rode upon the mid-sized dragons, but both the dragons and the men were equals, both in status and in friendship. And everywhere dragonettes the length of a man's forearm abounded. People kept them as pets and taught them simple tricks. At Lord Refa's very first stop, a large city, he was met at the gates by the mayor, and flanking the mayor were the city guard. Both heavily armed men in armor, and armored dragons the size of warhorses. The mayor told Lord Refa that he and his troops were welcome to stay as long as they behaved themselves. But if he or any of his troops harmed or attacked any of its citizens, the city guard would be called in to arrest all of them. And he added that both the people that lived there, as well as the dragons, were all citizens equal under the laws of the land. Then the mayor stepped aside and the city guard rode a short distance away. Lord Refa fumed at this treatment, but grudgingly accepted it for the moment. He spent the first day just quietly watching how those in the city lived their lives. There was the usual buying and selling in the marketplace, in selling food and drink equally to both the people and the dragons. And just as night fell, open-air taverns opened up their huge doors and the armored dragons went into those and ate and drank, along with their human counterparts. Both the men and dragons paid with gold and silver coins, and that only stoked his greed and his anger ate everyone around him. For 5 days he stayed in the city and watched, and each day his greed, resentment, and anger grew inside him. Upon the 6th day, he and his men left the city. His men liked the city, and the inns and taverns, and admired both the dragons and the human dragon guards, as they were called. But Lord Refa's anger and pride caused him to hate all of those who lived here, and he imagined that everybody there was laughing at him, and nobody laughed at him. Nobody who still lived, every step back towards his own land, to his proud and arrogant mind, mocked him, reminding him of his shame. And nobody mocked him, ever. And still lived. A few miles from the border, he and his men found a large clearing in the woods, and a pretty peasant girl with her 4 dragonettes was there. She was dancing, singing, and shaking a tambourine while her 4 dragonettes flew in complex circles over her head. She stopped dancing and smiled at them. The men admired her looks, but Lord Refa scowled at her in sullen anger. She asked where they were going. One of the men replied that they were going back to their own country. She nodded, then told them they were upon the right road, and they'd reach the border before dark. Lord Refa just glared at her, then growled sullenly at her. At that moment one of her dragonettes landed next to her and made a soothing trilling sound. Lord Refa glared at it and muttered obscenely about it, and what it could do with its hoard of treasure. The peasant girl replied to that she knew where a dragon's hoard was, but it would do him no good to take it. Lord Refa screamed in rage and drew out his sword. He was going to kill her for her insulting remark. She just smiled and told him to look behind him. He turned, his men turned, and they saw behind them 3 enormous dragons. Lord Refa and his men were struck mute by the sight of them. As for the dragons, they coolly eyed them all. One dragon told them that what the girl said was indeed true, and if he didn't resheath his sword he was going to be roasted alive. The second casually remarked that the road was still open and they should, for their collective health, leave right now. And the third added that they must all be simpletons, not wondering why such a young and pretty girl was performing so energetically in an empty clearing in the woods. Then all 3 of the dragons grinned at them, exposing huge white teeth. Lord Refa, followed by his men, galloped down the road as fast as they could. Understandably, they crossed the border well before the sun set. 3 months later, Lord Refa returned to our country. he was riding at the head of his personal troops. In addition to them, he had hired many mercenaries as well as every dragon slayer he could get. An army of over 5,000 heavily armed and armored men was coming our way. We, of course, had seen them coming and were ready for them. He and his army approached our border, and was met by our own army. 5,000 men, 50 huge dragons, 2,000 armored riding dragons, and over 2,000 trained war dragonettes. They were all in formation and very quietly waiting for Lord Refa and his army to arrive. Lord Refa and his army saw ours and stopped cold, a few feet from the border. Lord Refa men gathered behind him, and the mercenaries and dragon slayers gathered together in two groups behind them. They nervously eyed our army while ours just coolly watched theirs. The mercenaries began conferring together, as did the dragon slayers. Finally, one of the dragon slayers walked towards the border and called out to us, "Who is the leader here?" "I am," called back the prince. "I am Prince Ian Stevenson. And behind me is," pointing at the dragon behind him, "Dare Mast, leader of the dragons." "Who are you?" the dragon slayer called back. "I am Lars Rogan. Lord Refa hired us to kill dragons. But, after seeing all of you here just waiting for us, we decided not to. All we want now is safe passage back the way we came." The prince and Dare Mast conferred together. Then Dare Mast called out, "You may go. We have good reason to hate all of you. As long as you all turn and walk away from us, you have safe passage. We accept. Good day to you." And turned to leave. In unison, all of the other dragon slayers likewise turned themselves and their equipment wagons around and began to leave. Lord Refa called out, "Cowards! Come back and fight. I paid you well." Lars Rogan replied without turning around, "What good is gold to a burned corpse? Against 2 or 3 we could defeat them, but there are too many dragons here waiting for us. All of us are brave, but we are not foolish enough to fight a battle we cannot win," and continued on. After many minutes, one of the mercenaries stepped up to the border and called out, "Prince Stevenson and Dare Mast. Lord Refa likewise hired us to fight against you. All we want to do now is leave with our lives intact. Will you grant us safe conduct back the way we came?" Again the prince and Mast conferred together. Then Dare Mast called out, "Yes. But you must leave immediately." "We will, my great and powerful lords. We leave now," and turned and began walking back the way he had come. The other mercenaries all turned around to face the rear, then waited for the mercenary to mount his horse. Then they all broke into a gallop and rode away, back the way they came. Lord Refa screamed out, "Cowards!" Then glared at his own troops and bellowed out, "Attack! Attack!" His troops did not move, neither forwards nor backwards. Lord Refa's face grew red with rage and once again bellowed out, "Attack the dragons! I order you, attack!" The leader of his troops just raised his hand. The troops waited for his orders. The leader stated calmly and clearly, "We have lost over 2/3 of our forces. Our opponents outnumber us many times to 1. And it's obvious to all of us that if we attack, we shall lose the fight. I don't believe they want to kill us, but it is very obvious they don't want us here either." Lord Refa glared angrily at the leader of his troops, then bellowed out in rage, "Coward! Attack the dragons! We shall slay them and take their hoards. All of them." The leader of the troops just sighed and replied, "That is the command of a madman. Hear me," he called out, "I am returning to our castle." We all swore to obey Lord Refa, but this command proves that he has lost his sanity. I will not obey his orders that will end in our defeat or worse. Nor will I command you to do the same. I return to our castle. Each man must decide what they will do. And turned his horse around and urged it to move back the way they had come. One, then another, and another, of the troops turned and followed him. Quickly the rest of the troops turned and followed their leader. Lord Refa bellowed with rage and pulled out his sword. Prince Stevenson gestured at Lord Refa and the princes. Dragonette darted forwards, and in an instant it had crossed the distance between the two of them. It screeched at Lord Refa's horse, which reared back in fright, throwing Lord Refa off the saddle. He landed flat on his back and sat up just in time to see the dragonette chasing his horse away. The dragonette squeaked once, then flew back to the prince. The prince called out, "You have no army, and no horse. Leave this place." Dare Mast added, "Go. If you ever return to this place you will be eaten," and roared out an ear-splitting roar. Lord Refa scrambled to his feet and ran for his life. It took Lord Refa 3 days to walk back to his castle. he spent 2 nights shivering in the outdoors and 3 days walking, and walking. By the time he got back to his castle he was hungry, thirsty, and his feet ached in agony. At his gate a platoon of the king's soldiers were waiting for him. They told him the king wanted to speak with him and offered him a horse to ride upon for the trip, and some food and drink as well. He devoured the food and inhaled the drink and climbed up onto the horse, and went to see the king. Towards evening he and the rest of the group arrived at the king's castle. He dismounted and walked in. When he got to the throne room the king was there, seated on his throne. Many nobles were there as well. Lord Refa walked up to the throne and began telling the king all about what had happened to him, the gross insults he had endured, the rank cowardice of his troops and those he had hired. All of the gold and silver he had seen changing hands, all of which had come from their hoards that should be his. Lord Refa raged on and on. Nobody said a word. When he finally stopped speaking, the king stated, "You can come in now." The leader of Lord Refa troops, and the leaders of the dragonslayers and mercenaries walked into the room. "You heard what he said?" the king asked. All three replied yes. The king nodded then said, "You were all correct. Prince Stevenson, I formally apologize for Refa actions." Prince Stevenson entered the room and replied, "No apology is needed. You are not responsible for his madness, nor his behavior. We do not hate the mercenaries, nor Refa men. The dragons however do not trust dragonslayers, which is easy to understand. But," he paused to say, "as long as they stay out of our country, the dragons will not hunt them down." Lord Refa listened to all this in shock. Then the king announced, "Lord Refa, your madness came close to embroiling us into a senseless war just to satisfy your false pride and arrogance. Refa, you are hereby stripped of your title and lands." Guards. 3 guards entered the room. "Take Refa out of here and put him in a cell. Tomorrow he will be sent to a remote prison for the rest of his life." Refa cursed and bellowed at the guards as they dragged him out of the room. That night, there was a royal banquet. Prince Stevenson and his dragonette were honored guests. And naturally talk turned to dragons' hoards. The prince laughed and called to his dragonette. The dragonette flew to him and began trilling. "This is the prince continued, dragonette's hoard, and pulled a tiny bag out of his pocket and opened it. Inside was a gold bead and a glass crystal. "This is it," the prince stated, "all of it. I raised him from an egg so he trusts me to keep it safe." The dragonette reached into the bag and took out the glass crystal, then flew to one of the lanterns that lit up the room and looked at the lantern through the crystal. Then it squeaked and held it up away from the wall, and a tiny rainbow appeared on the wall. It made a sound, a happy chirrelling sound, as it watched the rainbow. Then it darted back to the prince and put it back in the bag. The prince put the bag back into his pocket and continued with, "A dragon's hoard is a lot more than just a pile of gold and silver. Our dragon's hoards include vast tracts of lands, cities, towns, and so on. Even people can be a hoard, so to speak." "People?" asked the king. "Yes," replied the prince, "people. For example, Refa and his troops met a peasant girl dancing and singing in the woods. She was entertaining 3 of the large dragons. So they were watching over her as they would watch over a hoard. The armored dragons consider the armor makers as their hoard, and take enormous pride in the appearance of their armor and the skill it takes to make it. So every armor maker has no fewer than 4 dragons as bodyguards. The best armor makers even more." He continued with, "The villages, towns and cities are where the people live, as do the dragons themselves. So they also are treated as hoards. As well as mines, crops in the fields, and so on. We both need all of that, so we live peacefully side by side. And they are very very glad nobody hunts down and tries to kill them in our country while they hibernate, or lay and care for their eggs, which is why they hate dragonslayers so much." "Makes perfect sense," observed the king. "For Refa to go into your country and openly declare that he wanted your dragon's hoards would be like breaking into a chuckle, somebody coming to the castle and demanding the contents of the national treasury." The king laughed then added, "That will never happen. But," the king paused, "I would like to give your dragonette something to add to its hoard." Prince Stevenson replied to that, "If he accepts it, yes. But like all dragons, he is very particular about what he likes." The king answered, "Understandable. Just a moment." Then gestured to his treasurer. He went to the king and the two conferred together. Then the treasurer turned and left the room. The king announced, "He'll be back shortly. In the meantime, we eat," and picked up some food and ate. Everybody, including the prince, laughed and resumed eating. Some time later, the treasurer returned. He was carrying a gold platter and a medium-sized bag. He placed the platter on the table and opened and poured the contents of the bag onto the platter. Small gemstones, gold and silver beads, and tiny gold and silver medallions spilled out of the bag and spread out upon it. "Your dragonette can have whatever it wants from this platter," the king said. The prince took the bag out of his pocket, opened it, and placed it next to the platter. Then he made a series of gestures to his dragonette. The dragonette watched him, then it uttered a trill and went straight to the platter. The dragonette picked up one gemstone after another, and looked through it at a nearby candle. "What is it doing?" asked the king. The prince replied, "He's particular, like I said before. All dragons are, only he knows what he's looking for." The dragonette squeaked, then put one diamond into its bag. It also spent some time examining the beads and medallions, and finally picked up 2 beads and a medallion, put them into its bag, then chirped. Then it chirled, and in the blink of an eye it picked up the bag and put it into the prince's pocket. The king laughed, then poured the rest of the treasure on the platter back into the bag. The treasurer picked up both and left the room. "Very cute, and I can see why they are so popular in your country," laughed the king. The prince replied to that remark, "I'll ask both the dragons and the dragonette breeders if they'll give you a few dragonettes. They are more particular than the dragons themselves." The banquet continued, with everybody talking and joking together long into the night. The next morning the prince returned to our country, and the former Lord Refa went to a distant prison for the rest of his life. Dragons' hoards. People also have hoards, and they guard them as fiercely as we guard ours. We learned that fact long ago. And we both learned that there was no real point to fighting each other. Together we are far stronger than any of our enemies. And so, my children, both dragon and human, thus ends the tale of Lord Refa and the dragon's hoard. A hoard he couldn't take and would not have valued very much to begin with. Not that she would have gone willingly with him. What happened to her? Eventually she married an armorer and had children. Some of their children still make armor and weapons for the armored dragons and the dragon guards, while others live ordinary lives. My 2 brothers and I still watch over the family. 2 of her granddaughters are lovely and are superb singers. And like all of our kind, we seldom abandon hoards that valuable. Thus this tale ends, and more will be told in their own time.